Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have Jesse Kaiser, who is the co-founder of Kaiser Enterprises and chair of Franchise Update's multi-unit franchise conference. Jesse, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on today.
It is my pleasure, Jesse, to have you on. I always try as many times as I can to bring somebody with a different, unique perspective in franchising. You are the first multi-unit franchisee I have ever had on the show. So I think it's going to be really cool for you to give a perspective as the franchisee and somebody who's really been around the block in franchising to help people that are listening, whether they're emerging founders, making sure that they're doing the right thing, and want to hear from you from the franchisee side of things. And also for people who are maybe looking to invest in a franchise, and you're going to give great insight, I know. So just want to give a little bit of color background. I understand that, Jesse, you own close to 50 franchises, multi-unit brands. So right now you're the owner of several of Sports Clips, Oxy Fresh Carpet, and Ideal Image. And you also previously owned Little Caesars and Valpak franchise as well.
Yes.
All right. How in the world did you get started in franchising?
This is a great question. So in my early 20s, in fact, when I was still in college, and to kind of date myself. So around 1997, I got asked to take an internship at a small technology startup in the town I was going to college. And that lasted till 2005. So from 97 to 2005, not the internship, but the employment with them. So basically this is during the .com era, right? And I had a great position. Basically, I, at one point or another, did everything in the company other than the actual hard coding of the software. So product development, training, sales, accounting, you name it. I would help wherever I was. I think I was employee number 13 actually ever. So I realized they were never going to have me be a partner of their company. And I understood that, and it was totally fine. But it was such an entrepreneurial job. I mean, it was a wild, wild west back then, if you think about it, with the internet.
Right.
And I caught the entrepreneurial bug. And there was a local, keep in mind, I'm living in a college town still. So pizza is a big deal, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there was a local pizzeria, and they were kind of on their last end. Food was great, but just the owner was tired. And we were going to go in and we were going to buy it, my brother and I. And one of my bosses, one of the owners of the company I was working for, it's like, don't do that. I'm like, well, why? He's like, you got a lot of great skills, but you don't know how to run a business yet. You should get a franchise. And that was the first time I heard the word franchise. I'm like, what is this? He's like, well, they're going to work with you and they're going to help you learn how to run the business. Okay, sounds good. So I just got on the internet, started searching pizza franchises, and lo and behold, I came across Little Caesars. So after about 10 seconds of deciding that was the brand I was going to do, I submitted my franchise inquiry and said, all right, let's do this. And so we caught them at transition time where they were going from pizza and trying to do delivery and trying to be other things other than Little Caesars. And it was just before they got into the hot and ready. In fact, the hot and ready was happening in some of the markets, but you couldn't find any information about it on their company website or anything. So we opened our first location as a $5 hot and ready pizza place, and it just took off. I mean, it was amazing. It was like, hold on tight for that rocket ship.
And where was this?
Well, Marion, Illinois was our first location. Very southern tip of Illinois. Yep.
Okay.
Like 16 or 17,000. It was not a huge town, but we pulled in far, far, far away, and we were very, very busy. I mean, it took 16 months, and we opened up our second one in another town down the road. And then 16 months after that, we had two more open. And all that was done for me saving up a little over $100,000 and enough cash to live on for a year, and putting that money into a bank account and getting an SBA loan against it and opening up my first location.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask you, did you bootstrap this? How'd you do this? So now you roll it into a second one after, you said 16 months?
Yeah, 16 months. Because, There is a learning curve, and being that young, I mean, I was 26, 27, and my brother was 23, 24.
Okay.
We still had a lot of learning, both just operationally and just life, how to manage everything.
Sure.
So it took us a little bit, but I mean, we got enough money that we could afford the loan payment on the first store and have enough cash to go and get another loan for the second store and then start paying ourselves. I didn't pay myself until we opened up the second location.
What year is this?
March of 2005 is when we opened up the first location, and then September 2006 is when we opened up the next one.
Okay. So we've got 2 franchise locations, you and your brother. Where do we go from here? Do you guys thinking about, and you have like, dollar signs dancing in your eyes? We're going to open up all these locations around the country. What's the vision for you young 20-something-year-olds at this point?
Well, we went gangbusters. We opened up 2 more in the next 16 months. So we got up to 4 real quick. And that became a little bit of an operation challenge for us, because when we had 2 locations, one of us could be at one and the other one could be at the other. So then we had to learn what everyone has to learn when they're in business by themselves and they open up the second location, is how do you leave the first location to go handle the second location? So that took a little bit time and learning experiences to happen, right? And at that same time, we were like, we want the stores to get even busier because we'd like to pay these loans off even quicker, right?
Right.
And so we were looking in rural markets, there wasn't a lot of like marriage mail options. So we opened up a Valpak franchise and started selling advertisement. Of course, we had our Little Caesars pizzas in there too. And we did that for many, many years. And during that time, I would go out and interview other business owners to see if they were someone that should be in the envelope and advertise in it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I came to the conclusion that I needed to be both in the salon business and the carpet cleaning business. And it was real simple. I met really good, nice business owners, but they did not understand the importance of marketing. And I thought, well, if I understand the importance of marketing and I can operate just as well as them, I'm going to win every time.
Wow.
So that's what we did. We parlayed and got into our next 2 brands because of that.
This really all happened. You can kind of say, not just because of Little Caesars, but really Valpak, because that opened up your eyes to how poorly so many people run a business, right? And they're not doing the marketing.
Yeah. And, this is just an observation I made years after the fact. And, not every business makes sense to be in Valpak, right? This isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of marketing solution.
Right.
But anyone that was willing to take a meeting with me and learn about the product and the service, they're still, for the most part, in business. Everyone that refused to meet with me and just see what we were about, a lot of them are no longer with us.
Wow. Would you say that you were also, was there a stroke of luck in this that you could have picked at, 26 years old, 24 years old, brother? You could have easily picked a wrong franchise, and the story could have ended differently.
Well, the first 2 locations we opened up, just like 7 years prior, there were Little Caesars in those markets.
And what happened?
Well, I mean, Little Caesars, all brands kind of have an ebb and flow, especially when they get big and nationwide. And it was just one of those ebbs and flows where they had a lot of store closures and kind of went down for a little bit. And then when we joined, they were on an upswing again. And so to be honest with you, there was a lot of people that were like, I miss Little Caesars Pizza. And there was a lot of people like, they went out of business. They don't do delivery. There was a lot of skepticism, especially when you're in your 20s and you don't have any other business experience. But
sure,
as far as I always luck is something to play into it. But my brother and I were prepared to muscle that thing up and over the finish line no matter what. I mean, we were Cortez. We burnt our ships.
Right.
There was no coming back.
No plan B, right?
No plan B.
What are your thoughts on plan B, by the way, for people that like to, keep the job and try to, have a franchise at the same time because they're scared? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'm always one for options for sure. But, when you've got something else that you're doing for a living and then you buy a franchise, I hate to say it, but 9 times out of 10, you bought a hobby, and hobbies normally cost money and don't make money. So most of the time, and there's some exceptions to the rule depending on the particular brand and the industry you're in. As an example, I'm not a licensed cosmetologist. I can't work within the 4 walls of a Sport Clips legally, right? And you don't want me cutting your hair anyway. So is that a semi-absentee business? It is. It absolutely is. I don't have to go visit a location for months at a time, and it'll run just fine as long as I'm watching the numbers
right
on the POS Yes, I'm talking to the manager. I'm reading the customer reviews. I don't have to go there and do that. The Little Caesars is a little bit different. I can make a pepperoni pizza. So that was a different mindset, because I was like, well, someone called in sick, I got to come in. In the salons, as an example, when someone calls in sick, I need to find another cosmetologist that's trained to come in and cover that shift. I can't come in and do it myself. So I would say that the Sport Clip franchisee owners that are the most successful focus on being a business owner full time. Now, I've got different brands, so you could be diluted in that, but I'm a full-time business owner, right?
Sure.
I'm not a full-time W-2 and high income W-2 employee, and then I've got this side gig going on, right? And the other thing is, in some of my entrepreneurial groups, they'll be like, "Hey, franchises, yeah, I was thinking about doing that with my wife." I was like, "Did she come to you with this?" Well, no, I just think, she's got time. She could do it. She's a smart girl. I'm like, "Do you like her?" I'm like, "Well, if you want to stay married,
Right?
Don't do this unless she comes to you and says this is her passion. This isn't rent a passion kind of thing. You've got to have the passion for the industry you're going to get into."
Jesse, if I had $1 for every potential franchisee who came to Discovery Day with their wife that said, "I'm going to keep my job, my wife is going to work this franchise," and she turns and looks at him like, "What? I'm doing what?" Or
Right.
they agree they're going to do it together. And as soon as they get back into their territory and they start working the business, inevitably the wife goes, "I didn't know I was getting a business. I didn't want this. This wasn't my dream. This was my husband's dream."
Yep.
And how often does something like that work out? Like never, right?
It doesn't. Yeah.
No. I have a friend who recently told me a story that the reason why he got in the kitchen and bath remodeling business was because after he read the E-Myth Revisited, he knew that he couldn't be a technician because he knew nothing about doing remodeling, and you wouldn't want him doing remodeling. So he decided, this is the perfect business for me because I can't do the technical aspects of the work. And that's sort of like what you're saying about sports clips is you don't want me cutting your hair. It forced you to be a business owner.
Yeah, I read that book many, many years ago, and when I first read it, I thought it was almost the Bible of entrepreneurism, right? But there's some nuances in that, especially his perspective on franchises. The dirty little secret to franchising is franchises have a smaller failure rate than non-businesses, which is what he says in the book. Part of that is because a franchisor typically requires you to have a certain amount of liquid and net worth. And one of the number one reasons all businesses fail is because of lack of capital, right? So once you get over that hurdle, you have that. But the other thing is they don't count a sell of a location as a closure or an end of a business. It's just change ownership. And it's very easy to sell and purchase franchises, much more than a regular business. So as an example, Sport Clips is more of a established brand. So there's not as many real estate A+ location options out there because there's already a Sport Clips in that area right close to it if it's not right there. So we're in the acquisition phase for that brand. And that's a very easy thing to do. Our sweet spot is we like to pay 3.5 times earnings.
Okay.
It's really easy to figure that evaluation out. Tell me what your sales are. Oh, by the way, the franchisor shares it with everyone. And then all you have to do is just tell me your rent. I can plug in everything else in my pro forma. And I know exactly how much money I'm going to make on that location. So then I can buy it, right? And subsequently, for the people that are selling their franchises because they're ready to retire or they lost their passion for that particular business, you're going to get a higher multiple selling your business as a franchise than you are if you're an independent person. So it's a win-win on both sides. The sellers get a better price, and the amount of work that I have to do to acquire a new location is almost next to nothing. It's all in the back office where we're just changing the power from their name to my name. It's the same POS. The only thing I got to do is show up the day that we take it over and type in the new credit card information. So all the credit card money comes to my account, not the previous owners. But it's the same operating policy, same uniform policy. It just makes you can acquire at such a faster, easier rate in the franchising industry than you can without.
Sure. I haven't had much involvement or experience with multi-unit franchising. So I'm really curious to know, for somebody such as yourself that has built, has 50 units underneath their umbrella, tell me about the structure of your company, of Kaiser Enterprises, and what does it take for you to be able to run? Obviously, you're not doing it yourself, or your brother's not doing it, but how are you guys able to run 50 units of franchise locations?
Well, it's a lot of divide and conquer and designated responsibilities within the company. So I believe this in any true situation, there must be a simplifier and a multiplier
Okay.
collaboration. Okay. Now, they could be two business owners like my brother and I. I'm the multiplier, he's the simplifier. But if you're inherently a multiplier, you need to employ a really good simplifier to match you. So what are the differences in these two? It's where you get your energy, where your passion is, and where your eyes are always looking, right? So as a multiplier, as an example, when we're talking about a P&L, number one thing I go look at is the top of the P&L. I want to see what the gross revenue is and how do I make that as big and fat as possible.
Okay.
Brother is a simplifier. He looks at the bottom and says, how can I make that as big and fat as possible? Right. So when we work together, it's an amazing thing. But the franchising industry is exactly that too. So you have the franchisor, they're the simplifier. They've created a process, they streamlined it, they're removing obstacles, right? And then as a franchisee, myself, I'm a multiplier. So I'm going to go out, I'm going to pick a location, another location, another location. I have to hire, I've got to train, I've got to staff all these locations. That's all multiplier events, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's a good collaboration there between a simplifier and a multiplier. So my brother and I are like that, getting back to that question. So he'll handle more of the back office and I'll handle more of the operations. I'm a little bit more face forward and he's a little bit more in the office and making sure that we're getting the best deals on all of our vendors, making sure that all the cash deposits are accurate, being deposited every day, those kind of things.
And so to kind of expand on that, I'm kind of curious of what your organization chart looks like. Is it just you and your brother and then individual units, or are there folks in between
we have a very thin admin office. We like it that way. In fact, to just give you an idea, for me to double the number of Sport Clip locations we have would require me to take on 4 more relationships and my brother 1 more relationship. That's it. And one of those is an admin person. The other 4 would be district managers, right? So I have an assistant, operational assistant, and he has a controller, and that's our office. I mean, I have a wife that handles the HR and payroll, but that's not her full-time job. It's so automated that she can do commissions and bonuses and everything within like 10 minutes because we've created a macro, clicks a button, it's all done, exports right into our payroll company, done. So we've done a lot of that. That's why we have so few people. Like we're able to actually reconcile all the deposits with a macro. We just download from the online banking. We download from the POS, and it just automatically searches and finds. And if there's any discrepancy, it highlights it and shoots out an alert.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So you had 5 brands. You now have the 3. You have Ideal Image. We talked about Oxy Fresh Carpet and Sports Clips. Jesse, what are some of the specific characteristics of a franchisor you look for?
I'm looking at their leadership team. Their culture. Are these people that I'd want to sit across the table from at Thanksgiving? My brother and I went through a lot of discovery days. That's when you go and visit the franchisor. We went through a lot of discovery days. We're wanting to get back into food. We haven't figured out exactly what we want to do, but we miss it, right? It's in our blood and we want to be part of it again. And what was interesting was we saw a lot of brands that we really liked. We thought the product was good. We thought the brand was good. But then when you started hearing about how they thought about their employees in the stores, it didn't resonate well with my brother and I. They looked at them as a liability and not an asset. Now, I didn't hear that from every single franchisor. Mm-hmm. There was a couple that actually spoke the same way that Charles and I believe, my brother, that, your employees are actually an asset and you've got to empower them, you got to develop them, and you got to trust them. So we gravitated towards those brands because of the same culture, right? Our ideas of what an employee is and who they are to us was very similar. So those are things that we pick. Now, there's other reasons. There's financial reasons. We can go in that too. But if you're looking at just like an observation at the brand, it's the people in the brand. I mean, franchising is a relationship business.
Mm-hmm. You hit the nail right on the head, but I can tell based on your answer that you and your brother asked different types of questions at Discovery Day for you to pick up on the observation on how they treated or how they think of employees. In my experience of hundreds of potential franchisees that came through my office for Discovery Day, yes, they cared about the leadership team, but they were so solely focused on themselves, right? As the candidate was so focused on, how do I make this business work? Can I financially make it work? They didn't look beyond themselves and the opportunity. Fortunately, I had a very strong culture with my team, and we were very close, and they gravitated towards us because I'd like to think we were very likable people, and they knew we all believed in the same vision. But clearly, most people that come to Discovery Day are not thinking the way you think.
No, and I think that comes from just our almost 20 years of having employees and realizing we can't have all these locations if we don't have great employees that we trust and develop, right? So there has to be some kind of appreciation there. And Sport Clips is a great brand. They believe so strongly in the stylist behind the chair at every location. It's just a really good vibe. Mm-hmm. At Sport Clips, right? Not just in my salons, but in almost every Sport Clip salon, no matter who owns it. And it's because at the very top, the brand is so stylist forward and understands how important they are to the life of the business. So I took that and just applied it to every other franchise brand that we've ever been into. Mm-hmm. Now, the other part of that too is, we have a philosophy in our company that if something happens more than once, we need to put a process to it or a system, right?
Right.
And so the motto is we're going to systemize the predictable so we can humanize the unpredictable. And so it wasn't that we were necessarily asking a lot of questions. We were just listening. And so you're going to have challenges. You're going to have challenges when you've got lots of locations as a corporation. And when you're talking about those challenges, are you talking about how we need to create a process so the employee doesn't have to worry about it? Or do we have to are we saying something like, oh, they don't care, they're not smart enough, they don't, there was a clear delineation between the two. And I heard some that were on one side of the camp, and I heard some that were on the other side of the camp. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, I went hard left to the ones that were all about, we got to create systems and we got to make it so our team can't fail.
Nice. As somebody looking at a potential franchise investment, what are some of the other non-negotiables that you said, this franchisor must have this?
Well, I want to know what their marketing plan is, right? Like, do they have an established marketing plan? And is someone doing it that's actually pretty competent? The best thing to do is call and ask other franchisees, are you happy with this? Are you happy with their response time? Are they interested in taking your feedback? Now, here's the problem. I don't want if I'm in a brand, I don't want every single franchisee that I'm a franchisee with having a lot of influence on the marketing director's decisions, because most of us are not that qualified. But we could say, hey, have you thought about this? And at least take it into consideration. Being heard is so important, right? Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, it's our money that we're spending, and we just want to feel good about it, because that's the most important thing. I mean, it's got to end in results without a doubt, but you've also got to be happy with those results.
Right. There's a balance. Right. Like you're saying, there's nothing more important than the franchise or franchisee relationship, and that you're being heard as the franchisee, but we can't implement as the franchisor. We can't implement, nor should we implement everything everybody asks. And on the franchisor side, I always say one of the hardest parts of my business of growing my franchise brand was I felt like the hard challenge was doing what's right, not necessarily what's popular.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes leadership can be tough sometimes, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, there is this natural pull. We talk about this. It's not an us versus them mentality in franchising that obviously is not beneficial to anybody, but there's something about a push-pull relationship that I always felt made our franchise brand stronger. We listen to them, they listen to us. We had sometimes opposing views on the how, but not on the why. So we were always rowing in the same direction, but maybe not always how we got there. And I think that in itself, when you're in franchising as a franchisor, like me starting out and bootstrapping it, and I didn't have a lot of resources, my franchisees were far, far superior than I could have ever afforded as an employee if I opened company locations. I think that's another benefit in franchising not many people talk about. They talk about, speed to market and using other people's money to grow. Well, but the acumen, right?
Think about this, like during the scary COVID times. I mean, it was franchisees that were bringing their wives and kids in at Dunkin' Donuts to serve coffee and shoot out espressos because everyone was sick or didn't want to come in, or, staffing was tight.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're not going to typically get a general manager that had the same investment. Honestly, I would never be comfortable with a general manager bringing in their wife and their kids to come work. That opens up a can of a lot of other things that you don't want to have going on in your business. But the person that actually owns the location, it's their prerogative. And I had lots of friends. I had lots of well-to-do friends that were definitely making coffee during the pandemic, because that's what needed to happen for the location to stay open.
You do whatever it takes.
Yep.
Right. What does it take to be a really successful multi-unit franchisee? If there was somebody who's like, I've never bought a franchise before at all, but I've come from a really illustrious career, made a lot of money, I understand management, and I want to diversify my assets. I want to go into multi-unit franchising. What are some of the most important aspects of it?
If you think about my tenure as a franchisee, I've been in fast food, I've been in sales and marketing, I've been in cosmetology salons, been in carpet cleaning, and I've been in medical spas. They're all different customers and they're all different employees. I have had success in all 5 of those brands because before I got into the brand, I did my research and I clearly understood who the ideal customer was and who the ideal employee for that customer was. And when you only know one of those two, part of the equation, it could be a challenge, it could be scary, and your success rate may not be as where you need it to be. But when you understand those two things and you know what speaks to both of them, you're going to be successful, because it goes back to, it's a relationship game.
Right. I love that you have such a diverse group of franchises that have nothing to do with one another.
Yeah, nothing.
And it just speaks to that, because all too often people get so excited about a specific brand because they like the idea of owning it, or I'd be proud to, be associated with this brand, and they like, a certain product because they're a customer of it. But what you're saying, at the end of the day, it comes down to obviously the franchisor or franchisee relationship and knowing the customer, knowing who you need as the employee. And you mentioned you didn't talk anything about the actual product itself, though.
At the end of the day, you just have to sell a superior product or a better value product or service than everyone else in your market. And if you do that, you're going to own the market share. I happen to be in almost every one of my businesses where it's almost, if not directly, a 1-to-1 ratio of an employee is clocked in doing a service and a customer is there getting and paying for the service, right? So if I have more employees, then I have more opportunity for more clients, right? So that's where I was getting in with, you got to make sure you got to have the right employees, because it doesn't matter about the product. It's about how the customer feels about the value of the product or service they're getting. And I would even argue with Little Caesars, it's a $5 large hot and ready pizza back in the day. I was still selling a service. The service was, you didn't have to call ahead. You didn't have to think. It was a good value. Just pull in, get it. You're the hero tonight for dinner, right? It was still a service. And so even though they were $5, if I made people wait 25 minutes for it, why would they come to me?
Right. That's the most important aspect of Little Caesars, right? That's how you sell it.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, it always got back to service, not the product.
How many I think you said earlier you talk about district managers. How many district managers do you have across all your brands that you own?
So the Ideal Image medical spas are siloed into a different corporation, and we don't have anything to do with, there are employees, but that relationship is very much like how when you walk into like a Ritz-Carlton, someone owns the physical Ritz-Carlton, owns the license or the franchise for it, but either Ritz-Carlton corporate or a third-party management company is managing the employees in the facility. And so the medical spas, because I'm not a doctor and I have to partner with a doctor in every state to do that. So we have that kind of set up for there. But we have a general manager for our carpet cleaning, because we've got the entire St. Louis DMA. It's a large area. We're the largest OxyFresh office in the nation for them. And then for the sport clips, I've got 4 district managers right now. And if I doubled the number of stores in sport clips, I'd have 4 more district managers. And that would mean that my brother would have to bring on 1 more person in the office.
What other brands excite you right now, or industries? I know you mentioned you guys have this affinity for food. You want to get it back into food, but overall, is there a industry or sector right now that you and your brother think there's some great opportunity out there?
Well, I see stuff in food. I've got a lot of friends that are jumping into the pet business, right? So like Dogtopia is an example. I've got 3 or 4 good friends that don't know each other that are all Dogtopia franchisees now. I think pet is an exciting thing. I think pets are. I think food is. Here's the thing about food. I think you're going to need to find concepts that allow you to have cheaper rent than what's currently out there right now. So you may be going into a B location or a second generation restaurant, but what you're saving your rent, you can then offset that by not having to have such high prices on the food. Okay. And I think that sounds exciting to me. I think there's some concepts out there that have really figured that out. I learned this at the multi-unit conference last year on a panel. They were talking about how do you evaluate a new brand. And I had always looked at it with one metric, right? And most people don't even look at it this one, but I look at it as it's a time issue. So how quick do I make my investment back? And anything 36 months or less is great. I'm jumping on that. You get me over 36 months, I'm starting to look at it like, I'm missing opportunities here with my turn of my money, right? So for me, it's like, okay, maybe I'm back at 36. The other thing that is really interesting that I'm looking at now is, you need to take the system average, not the top 25, not the bottom 20, the system average sales, and what are the multiples going for right now if you want to exit it? And for me, it was made very clear, why would you get into a concept that when you sell it, you're selling it for less than what it costs to build?
Right.
And there's a lot of concepts out there that are like that. Even though you can make great money, do not get me wrong, you may own a location for 15 years and net millions of dollars in profit off of it. But at the end of the day, when you want to exit it, wouldn't it be nice to sell it for more than what you paid to open it, even though you made all that great money?
Yeah.
So that's just another variable that as I get older and a little bit more tenured in this, that's another component to the equation I'm looking at. What are the exit multiples?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most franchisees, especially newer franchisees going into the business, do not think about exit strategy and what I can get out of this on the way out, right?
No. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I can tell you, I didn't even read I don't even think it was an FTD. What was it before the UAC?
UFOC, Uniform Franchise
UFOC,
Offering
yes.
Circular.
Yes. My first thing was one of those, and I didn't read it other than where they had the little tab for me to sign my name. I mean, I could have been signing my life away. I wanted to be a business owner. I wanted to be a franchisee, come hell or high water. And I was convinced if other guys and girls were able to do it,
so can I. Yeah. Well, that goes back to, I don't care if you're in franchising or not franchising. The exit strategy discussion does not come up, very often because we're so excited about getting into business. And if you ever said to somebody getting into business, well, what's the exit strategy? They go, what exit strategy? I'm just getting into this. I'm going to do this for life. Most people, we don't do anything just, for life, but especially in franchising, because you have a franchising agreement that's in place and you need to understand what you can, what you can't do, and what the franchisor can, if the franchisor has the first right of refusal, and your abilities to sell a franchise are critical decisions depending on, the brand that you're getting into, right?
Yeah. And when you have multiple brands, you really, you move from playing checkers to chess.
Yes.
And as an example, we were tickled pink with Little Caesars. We were making money on them. The only reason we sold them was there was an opportunity with the medical spas. And we're like, we can get a great multiple right now for this. Let's take that money and parlay it into these medical spas that have this other type of earning potential. So it was a chess piece. We just moved around the thing. So it's never that you dislike a brand. I've never gotten in or gotten out of a brand that I actually didn't like just as much when I was getting out of it that I liked when I got into it. So I've had a really positive experience with it, but they are chess pieces. And, thinking about your exit strategies is just as important as your entrance.
Basically, Jesse, what I'm hearing is you try to take the emotion out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's still an emotional play. It absolutely is. And I think part of the reason is my brother and I's interest to get back in food is like, we feel guilty about selling our Little Caesars, but I mean, we just kind of miss that type of here's what I can tell you. I really like working with cosmetologists. I like working with fast food workers. So many times you can come in and say something to them and you blow their mind with a new perspective on life. And that's more rewarding to me than coming in and talking to a medical professional at one of my med spas or taking them out to dinner for a celebration or something like that. You can have such a different impact on people's lives in a good or bad way, depending on how you want to be, when you're dealing with things that are where a college degree isn't required. And
Yeah.
franchising has a lot of opportunities to employ people like that.
Well, what do you think is your responsibility as the franchisee of all these employees, hourly employees at, fast food, or, other folks, the cosmetologist? What do you think, how your leadership comes into play and the responsibility that you have?
Yeah, it's all about developing other people and helping them obtain capability.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I could have someone that might want to be a store manager for me for the next 20 years. God bless them. I would love that stability in them, right? But something's going to have to happen for them over those 20 years. It's going to keep them engaged with both me and make them happy in life. And so that's about giving them new capabilities. Maybe it's about how to have better and deeper relationships, not just with your employees and customers, but with your family members, right? So I just believe that there's a lot of opportunities to teach people and develop people skills and capabilities that are applicable to the business, but also to their personal life.
Cool. Have you had anybody cross over from any one of your brands to another brand?
No. Well, I mean, I've had like some high school front counter people at Little Caesars go to cosmetology school, and then years later come to work at a Sport Clips that we owned in the same market.
Right.
But other than that, we keep all the brands very separate. The back office is done because money's money, payroll's payroll. Doesn't matter if you're selling pizzas or cutting hair. Paychecks are every other Friday. So we have people in the office that will handle all the back office stuff together, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as operations, brand, I mean, each one of our brands, we have a different mission statement. We have a great mission statement, but each brand has a mission statement. And so like what you're trying to do and how you want to accomplish it, it's a little different. So while they all have the same thing, like we feel cared about, they're completely different, like languages. And so we don't mix them a whole lot.
Okay. I want to switch gears here and I want to focus on this upcoming conference. So I understand you are the chair of the multi-unit franchise conference that's coming up. And we're going to make sure this podcast comes out way before March of 2024. Let's talk about that.
Well, I'm excited to announce the ink is still wet. We're having Jim Collins come.
Nice.
He is going to be a keynote speaker. And if anyone's ever heard Jim speak, he's phenomenal. But he also is going to do, for lack of a better word, he's going to do a workshop on top of his keynote, where he's going to actually work with some of the entrepreneurs and franchisees in the audience. So I'm pretty excited about that. This is great that I'm on a podcast about franchising, because a lot of times I'm on podcasts where it's just general business and they don't quite understand the nuances of it. But one thing that I've noticed in my observation is every single brand will give you, once you sign up and you get trained, they're going to hand you an operations manual that you can then hand to a store manager. And it's going to be how that store should be ran, the four walls, operations, brand standards, everything. But they don't have one for multi-unit management. No one does, right?
Okay.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm different than all the other Sport Clip owners, and all the other Sport Clip owners are unique to themselves too. So our unique abilities and what we want out of the business are all different. And so if my strength is different than the guy down the road, I need a different district manager than he needs, right? Mm-hmm. So their responsibilities and how they handle themselves could be night and day different. And where I'm going with all this is that the individual locations function as a brand, but how the management of those locations is really the wild, wild west, where it's however you want to do it. So this conference is like that operations manual for the multi-unit, because what you're going to do with over 2,000 people going to this conference, you're going to run into another entrepreneur that has a very similar unique ability or skill set that you have, very similar interest in what they want out of their business. Like, do I want to wake up in the middle of the night and start worrying about XYZ so I can squeeze out another point on my P&L? Mm-hmm. Or do I want to sleep until 10 a.m. and just like it's a good profitable business, right? You're going to run into the gambit of different entrepreneurs. And what's great is there's enough guys and women there that if you've got 10 locations, there's someone there with 50 or 100 or 200, 1,000 locations.
Wow.
That's already done it. And the biggest thing is they're the most willing to tell you all of their mistakes. And I'm telling you, the best rakes to step on are not to step on them, right?
Right.
And so if I can learn from someone else's stepping on a rake and I don't have to, that's gold in the bank. So this conference is that operations manual for a multi-unit operator. It's how do you make it happen? Like we just spoke at the Franchise Expo in Germany last week. We were in Germany for 12 days. I didn't get a single phone call about work. Not one. Now, were there issues that came up while we were gone? There were. But my district managers knew how to handle it. And when I did my investigation on how everything was handled, I'm going to tell you 95% of the time, they would have done it exactly how I would have asked them to do it. So, I mean, how do I do all that? Because I've got friends from this conference that over the last 10 years have shared with me their trials and tribulations, and I've learned from them. They've given me advice. I come to them with advice, and it's a mutually beneficial thing. And this is the only place that you're going to find that. So you could be a big dog in your brand. You're going to go to this and you're going to see all the other big dogs in the other brands, and you're going to share things. And, one of my best friends, he's in a competing hair chain. We're just not in the same market. If we were in the same market, we'd probably hate each other, right? But we're not. And so we share best practices with each other. And it's not, look, a Sport Clips is ran much different than all the other chains, right? So it's not like we're sharing insider information on operations, because our operations are bound by the brand identity. But how you handle employees calling in, that's not brand identity. That's your company philosophy. And how do you feel about that? And I can tell you how I feel about like people calling in when they're sick, much different today than it was 15 years ago, right? If you're sick, I don't want you coming to work. Back then, I'm like, if you're living, you need to come in and cover your shift, That's happened over the years. They're like, guys would come to me like, you might not burn through your employees so much that if they call you and you can tell they're sick, just to say, please get better and we'll see you soon.
Right.
I started adopting that. My turnover just went down. So, it's just simple things like that. And could a franchisor tell you that? Sure, they could. But it's almost always like you never listen to your parents. You listen to someone else's parents, That's another great example of that is everyone else's parents are there to tell you how to have a better life.
Yeah, we'll always listen to our peers first.
Yeah.
First and foremost. Yeah, I think every episode we somehow reference how generous the franchise community is. And, I've been at the IFA since my very first year. And, I was shocked the first time I saw two competitors actually giving each other advice. That's what I try to do on the show, knowing that there are people that are competing with one another. I've had more conversations with people who, quote unquote, competed with my prior company, like at Springboard and Emerging. And it's just like the industry is it's so vast. It's so big. There's no one person that could ever have a monopoly and take over everything. If we can help each other, grow each other's businesses, at the end of the day, we're going to raise the bar in overall in the business that we're trying to achieve in.
Yeah. So, you talked about the IFA. So, I'm on an executive committee for the franchisee forum. There's 3 legs of IFA. There's the franchisors, there's the franchisees, and then there's the supplier network, right? Supplier network would be anything from a digital marketing company to an attorney to a PR firm, right?
To us now, we're now a supplier officially of the IFA.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks.
So the franchisee forum is kind of the odd duck in the whole thing because, before, let's say 10, 15 years ago, IFA was very franchisor focused, and they've made a real conscious effort to get franchisees involved. And so the forum doesn't have a long legacy of this is how it is. And so we've got some great people in there now. They're figuring out how can we make this more exciting, more beneficial to a franchisee to show up. So, we're looking at making this thing be part. How do we help facilitate you going out and meeting with local congressmen and senators like you're in district to help sway them on franchising legislation? As another example, there is a tax bill that benefits salons and everyone in that industry. And I have gotten people to co-sign the legislation, both when we did the IFA summit in Washington, D.C., and then also going out and meeting with them in their local offices. And it was great. I mean, I took my brother to his first local one, and he's like, wow, this is amazing. Like, you can actually meet this person and they'll listen to you. And we walked away with everyone saying, yes, we're going to co-sign this. So you felt like you made an impact, right? And that's pretty powerful. So we really want to get more involved with that. We want to get more mentoring going on. So, and it's not just like, how do I get to 1 to 3 units? It's more like, hey, my daughter's getting married. How much should I spend on this?
Right.
Like everything like that, because we're all in the same ship. the ship's got different levels. It's like the Titanic. I don't want to say that like it's going down, but it's a big ship. And so, you could be on the deck, you could be up in your room. Your life is a little bit different, but you're still on the same ship of franchising.
You mentioned legislation. Jesse, I'm curious, obviously the hot button is the joint employer. So I know how franchisors think about it. How do franchisees and multi-unit franchisees think about this potential
we feel
joint?
the exact same way. We feel the exact same way. Unfortunately, what do they say? Everyone rates themselves an above average driver. And that's just not possible if everyone rates themselves as an above average driver. So I think, everyone rates themselves as an above average employer of choice, even though that's just statistically not right. But I can tell you this, I genuinely feel I handle my employees much better than any franchisor would. Not because they're terrible people, but that's not their wheelhouse. Their wheelhouse is to protect a brand, build a brand, and remove obstacles for me, right? With like supply chain, branding, marketing, all those things. I just don't see how any brand, any franchisor could handle that. I mean, look at Starbucks as an example. That's not really a franchise model. And they're running into employee issues right now just because they're so big, right? And they're not having enough touching points. So I think when the owner who can make decisions about the business is able to still touch the actual employee, we have so far fewer issues because everyone realizes there's a human on the other side. And so it's not that you have to get what you want. You need to be heard. You need to feel like you've been heard, right? And if you don't have those human touch points, how do you feel like you've been heard?
Yeah, sure. Well, this whole legislation about the joint employer looks like it's not going to benefit anybody at the end of the day. And
no, my prediction is it's going to go to the Supreme Court and this will go to bed. And I don't think 10 years from now, this will be much of an issue for franchising. I think this is not a good outcome that just came out that starts, I think it was December 26th, right after Christmas, right? Is when it goes in. But I think the policy so failed that it's going to get challenged and there's going to be cracks in it. And the Supreme Court's going to say, this is a silly standard that you guys have. And once it's gone to the Supreme Court, I think it's going to be precedence and that's it. And I'm pretty confident that the court that we have right now is pretty understanding of how an employee-employer relationship should be.
Sure. Let's talk about the next hot button. And that is the proliferation of private equities getting involved in franchising and creating platforms. As a multi-unit franchisee, do you have an opinion on this private equity involvement in franchising? And what are your thoughts on these platforms that are being created?
Well, I look at, for people that aren't really familiar with private equity and how it works, I would just say, equate this to Shark Tank. There's probably a shark you really like and there's a shark you really hate. And you're going to see that same thing in private equity, right? They've all got different styles. They've got different personalities. So sometimes when a private equity group buys out the franchisor or buys a percentage of it, it could be a great thing and it could be a bad thing. The one advice I could tell you that's tried and true is before you sign it, read your franchise agreement. Understand every part of it. I did not do that in my first one. I was too excited. I just signed it. But if there is a clause in there that says they can do X, Y, Z, they may look you in the eye and say, we'll never do that. We just have that there for the rogue franchisee. And the person that's telling you that is 100% truthful. You should believe them because I believe most people in franchising are honest, sincere people.
I agree.
As soon as you sell that to private equity, they didn't make that promise to you. And I bought this agreement and this agreement gives me this ability to do this. And we feel like it's the best for the brand. Just make sure that everything that's in your franchise agreement is stuff that you're okay with if it were to come true. And so not all franchise agreements are written the same. I've got friends that are franchisors and I think I would be a great franchisee for them. I like their brand, but I looked at their franchise document and I'm like, you want to charge me $5,000 for every unapproved marketing item I ever send out? No, I'm not going to do that. So I'm not going to sign up with you. As much as I love you and I think your brand's awesome, I don't want you to have that kind of power over me.
Sure.
If they struck that from it down the road, then that would be a different conversation. But as long as it's in there, if they sold the private equity and then all of a sudden I forgot to have a Valpak approved, right? Boom. I'm bankrupt because 5,000 times 10,000 and it's a lot of money.
Yeah. I think that the increase in private equity being involved in franchising can be really good in that it's really professionalizing, if that's a word, It's professionalizing franchising, and it's going to help elevate several brands that otherwise wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, Moses from the Bible, I think a quote I heard about him was the skills that get you out of Egypt are not the same skills that get you into the promised land.
True.
Right. And so a lot of time founders have great ideas and they've got the rocket fuel to get it off the ground and get it going. But when it's time for that next stage of the rocket to kick out, sometimes the founders aren't the right people for that.
Yeah.
And so that's when private equity or just another ownership group comes in and takes it to the next level for sure. That's why I made the Shark Tank reference, because, you may love or hate Mr. Wonderful, right? And so Mr. Wonderful is successful, but you may not choose to have him be your shark, right? So just know that all private equity is not created equal, that there are some really good ones. And the really good ones, in my opinion, are the ones that have figured out how to have that human contact still. And as long as they're humanizing the unpredictable things, they're going to be successful. And I think it's going to be a benefit to franchising in general.
I agree. Let's give out some of the info on the multi-unit franchise conference. So when is it? Where is it? And how can people find out about going?
It's in Las Vegas. It's March 19th through the 22nd. It is in the new conference center. It's called Caesar's Forum, not to be confused with Caesar's Forum, where you shop and eat and things like that's connected to it. It's across the street from Caesar's Palace, right behind the link and very close to the High Roller.
And website?
MultiUnitFranchising.com, I believe, is the website.
Excellent. Somebody that's looking to even just get involved in buying a franchise, they're first and wants to get into multi-unit franchising. Is this a good conference for them to kind of learn?
I call it the best happy hour in Vegas. So for 2 of the nights, from I believe like 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., there is a open bar and great hors d'oeuvres in a huge expo room where all these franchisors have booths. And because this is where all the big whales of franchising go, they bring their very best people. So a lot of times it's the founders, it's the CEOs, it's the chief development officers, instead of someone that just sells and is going to a regional expo. Like, you're going to meet people that you're going to see in the brochures or on the website. And so, yeah, it's you just walk by, see something that catches your eye, stop, ask questions. They're there to educate you on their brand. Well, let's give you an idea. There was, I think, we counted 19 different chicken concepts at last year's conference. Just chicken. So many options. So if you wanted to do chicken, you had 19 choices to go from. And from KFC, Popeyes, the brands I had never heard of.
Wow. I don't know if you got the numbers yet, but any idea on how many franchisors are going to be there exhibiting?
No, I don't know the number. I know that it's already sold out. It's as far as the franchisors having a booth, sold out. There's no more room, to give you an idea. Plenty of room for attendees. We're just talking about the 10 by 10 spaces, right?
Yep.
Those are sold out. But franchisors are still welcome to attend the conference because there is some great breakout panels and great opportunity to network and still meet people. And, you're walking around and you see this guy talking on a panel, a franchisee, and you're like, that guy could be a great franchisee in my system. I mean, I've spoke on many of the panels, and when I'm done, if I'm having a great day, I have a lot of people coming up to me with their business cards trying to get me to talk to them about their concept. If I have a rough day, I don't get as many, because I don't come off as articulate.
I'm sure you do just fine. You do just fine. I have a close friend who's looking to get involved in multi-unit franchising, and I told him about your conference, and I was looking at the dates, and I was like, I've never been to the multi-unit franchise conference. We didn't do multi-unit franchises back with I-9 Sports, so I never had a reason to. But I said I'm gonna go with him because I'm really curious to see what I'll learn. I'm sure I'm gonna learn a whole lot. It's like another world of franchising that's uncharted territory for me. So I'm excited about it.
It's a great show, great vibe. Everyone there is interested in learning and interested in giving back. So I really enjoy it. Like I said, some of the best friends I've ever had have come from this conference.
Sweet. Jesse, this has been awesome show. So much different than, my typical guest that I have. You come from a completely different background. But I do want to finish with the one question I ask every guest at the end. And that's, I have this thing called the tip jar because the franchise community is so generous. If somebody was looking to franchise their concept, what would you, as Mr. Multi-Unit franchise brand, tell them that they need to do before they franchise their business?
they need to really understand their own P&L for their concept.
Okay.
And they need to understand that they've got to make money just like the franchisee does. So I work with a lot of emerging brands, and a lot of times they're like, oh, we're just going to do a 2 or 3% royalty. I'm like, well, based on the volume of your corporate stores, I'm like, that's not enough to pay a coach to come out even once a year. Like, you need to probably be more in line with that 5 or 6%, which is kind of an industry standard. And you need to make sure that there's actually enough profit at the bottom of that thing that minus the 6% royalties, minus the ad fund, that they still get a good wage, right? A good return on their investment. So unit economics is the number one thing. I'm telling you right now, if you've got great unit economics, you can speak broken English and you're going to sell this like hotcakes, because that's what it means. It's all about the unit economics. If you're telling me I can make my money back in 18 months and it only costs $450,000 to open, boom, you're going to get people buying them left and right. The other piece of advice is go slow. The dead men walking these days are units sold but not open.
Oh yeah. When somebody says, I have 100 locations, how many open? 3? Yeah, you still got a lot of runway to still.
Yeah. And, a lot of people don't know this, but we talked about the founders having the genius of creating the concept and the rocket fuel to get it off the ground. Mm-hmm. At some point, you may want to bring in an equity partner. I'm not even talking about buying or being bought out 100%. You may want to bring in an equity partner, like, to share some of the responsibilities. Your evaluation for your business is going to go way the heck down if you've got 3 open and 100 locations sold, because you've already collected that money and you probably burned through that cash before you even get to the point where you can support them. And it costs money to support them. So grow at a pace where when you sign someone up, get them open. Don't sell them another license till you get the next one open. Now, there's some scales there, but in the very beginning, go slow. Make sure that you're not getting your skis in front of you.
Jesse, this was great. I appreciate your time. It was a pleasure meeting you. You've given some great advice to emerging franchisors and folks looking to buy a franchise. So thank you again for being on the show. I will see you at the MultiUnit conference for sure in Vegas in March.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.